Hi guys, happy Wednesday. Um, so obviously I am sending out class today. Couple of reasons, but the block ends in 3 weeks. So I really want to give you as much time as possible to get caught up in where you need to be for class, but I still want you to get the information that you need. So block ends in 3 weeks. That is March 21st. That is a Thursday. That is the last day of block 3. Because of that, grades will be zeroed out by Monday, meaning even our assignments that haven't been due yet will show a 0 until you do them, just so you can see exactly where your grade is and how you're doing in class without any surprises on the end of the block. If you need a specific catch-up plan or you're not sure where to start, please just let me know. I am more than happy to help you get caught up if you are behind. If you are not behind, thank you so much for being on top of things. All right, so today we're going to talk about gender as a social construct. That's what your reading is going to be on tomorrow and what your text questions are looking at. So yeah, we're going to challenge some of our stereotypes and our preconceived notions today. And we're really looking at gender from a sociology point of view. Okay, so we're going to start with an activity called gender identification, right? So you're going to guess the gender of several people, basing your judgment purely on the information supplied. So you're not going to be able to circle the board, but I want you to just tell me or think about this like, does this description sound more like a person that is female to you or more like a person that is male? Okay, so our first one. Architect, 32 years old, married with 2 children, likes skiing and skating, spends occasional weekends in Vermont, reads extensively about UFO abductions and psychic phenomena. Just based on that information, do you feel like this describes more a female or more a male? And I really want you to think about what things push you to your decision. Is it their hobbies? Is it their age? What kind of things are making this judgment in your mind? Okay. Scenario 2. College student, a 23-year-old senior majoring in philosophy and planning to go to law school. Gay, involved in an ongoing relationship, is on the college debate team, likes dancing and old movies, works out at the gym. Again, do you feel like this is describing more male or female? And what's pushing that identification in your mind? Is it the major? Is it the relationship status? Is it their hobbies? These are the things we're looking at. Okay, third one. 68-year-old elementary school English teacher, retired, married with 3 children and 5 grandchildren, likes gardening, Shakespeare, and Broadway musicals. Favorite musical is Rent. Again, would we think that this is describing someone who is male or someone who is female? Okay. 51-year-old estate agent, divorced with 1 child, heterosexual, actively dating but no steady relationship, likes to travel, goes to Mexico or the Caribbean every year. Favorite TV show is CSI Miami. Now, is there one thing that sways your decision? Is there multiple things? Are there some things that you're like, well, this to me describes more what I would associate with female traits, but these sound like male traits? What do you think? Okay, high school basketball coach, age 26, married, no children, played basketball in high school and college, majored in physical education, also likes to play the piano and paint. Again, does this seem like more female attributes or more male attributes? What about 8 years old and in the 3rd grade, wants to be an archaeologist, takes Spanish lessons on weekends, and the favorite TV show is Fairly Odd Parents? Are you leaning towards male or female here? Okay. College student, age 20, majoring in chemistry, plans to become a doctor, heterosexual, involved in an ongoing relationship. Favorite movie is The Wedding Date. there one thing here that pushes you more towards male or female than the other descriptors, or nothing? Okay, what about an accountant? Age 34, heterosexual, no steady relationship, likes hunting, fishing, and rock climbing, likes science fiction movies. Okay, so in this activity, what information did you use to make your identification? Right, some of the things that you could have based those decisions off of um, age, relationship status, um, major in college, their profession, the job that they had. You could have based it on their hobbies, maybe their movie choice or their show choice pushed you one way or the other. Okay, but the interesting thing about this is that when we're doing this gender identification, it is completely based on our preconceived notions, stereotypes, and our experiences, right? Um, there is no correct answer. Gender is really a social construct. So male, female, that's something that has been created socially. Um, both men and women can and do exhibit the characteristics that we looked at and many, many others. And while there are some percentage differences, right, like males generally lean towards this job or this hobby, or females lean towards this job or hobby. There's some slight percentage differences, but none is significant enough to allow for a general rule. So there's not a significant enough percentage gap to say, oh, most females do blank or most males like blank. Okay. And this can be kind of confusing, right? Because I think we look at um, gender as biological, but the term gender actually refers to the traits, characteristics, roles, and social positions that are attached to being female or male. So they're the things that we think that males or females do. Okay, whereas a person's sex is biological. Okay, a gender is socially constructed identity assigned to a person as a result of their sex, and that's where it can get kind of confusing or gray area, but we're looking at the social construct of gender. So again, just the difference between those two on the board. Sex is the biological traits, so that's same across societies, whereas gender is the characteristics or the traits, and that can vary from culture to culture. So knowing that, I want you to think about some characteristics that you think are masculine in our culture and in others. What are some things that we generally associate with males or masculinity? Okay, and what about the other side? What are some characteristics that we associate with being feminine? Um, what are those characteristics in our culture and in others, right? Because it's different depending on the culture. Now, all of us might have different things that we think, and that's because of the agents of socialization. Okay, so just like they have affected the other things we've looked at in this class, right? Like norms, taboos, we've looked at race, we've looked at ethnicity, we've looked at social stratification. Family, school, peer groups, and media all affect gender as well. And I'm curious, like, what do you think is the most powerful socializer of gender between family, school, peer groups, and media? Okay, so knowing that, we're going to look at some case studies. And I want you to just think about how did stereotyping affect the circumstances and what were the repercussions or consequences of stereotyping, right? It could be positive or negative. So, case study one, Jamal and Rebecca have been in a relationship for just under 1 year. Jamal always decides where they go, what they do, and pays for everything. Rebecca has suggested that as both of them only have part-time jobs and are low on money, that they should pay an equal share when out together. Jamal, however, believes this is inappropriate and tells Rebecca that it is a man's job to make decisions and have financial control. Okay, so what stereotypes are affecting these circumstances? Maybe that it's the man's job to make the money, that the man should pay for things. Those ideas are affecting here. So it's putting potentially, right, the repercussions or consequences, some stress on their relationship. Um, Maybe Rebecca feels like she can do more, but isn't sure how to do it. Maybe Jamal is feeling extra pressure. Those are some repercussions or consequences of the stereotyping. Okay, case study 2. Alice has recently completed a politics degree from Bangor University. She hopes one day to become a member of parliament for her local constituency. However, as of 2012, less than 25% of the House of Commons is female, with it being seemingly more difficult for women to receive candidacy and therefore gain election to parliament than it is for men, making Alice question whether or not she should pursue her political ambition. Okay, so go ahead, think about the stereotypes that are here, and then what are the repercussions or the consequences of these stereotypes? Okay, case study 3. During a mixed-sex football tournament, the referee announces that when a girl scores 1 goal, it will count as 3 goals, as he believes girls are not as good at football as boys, as it is a male sport. Again, what kind of stereotyping do you see here? And what are the repercussions or consequences of the stereotyping? And I want you guys to think hard about this because you will see one of these case studies in your exit ticket. So I want you to be able to tell me what the stereotypes you see are and what the repercussions or consequences of those are. Okay. All right, so we're going to look a little bit closer at theories of gender. So go ahead and watch this video.
Why is gender even a thing? We've talked about what gender is and how it affects people's lives, but we've skipped over a fundamental part of the whole issue of gender. Why does it matter to us so much? Gender isn't the same in all cultures. Mainstream Western ideas have focused on the idea of gender as a binary, with masculinity and femininity serving as mutual opposites. But other cultures have 3 genders, or see gender as fluid, or describe gender as a spectrum, rather than a set of distinct types. For example, many Native American and First Nation peoples recognize a 3rd gender that incorporates both the masculine and the feminine, and it plays a specific sacred role within their culture. While different tribes all have different terms for this gender within their own languages, nowadays many use the umbrella term Two-Spirit. But there are no known societies that have no concept of gender. So why is that? Why do we, no matter what society we live in, ascribe so much meaning to gender? Talk about why we have gender in the first place, we need to go back to the 3 theories that sociology is built on: structural functional theory, symbolic interaction theory, and social conflict theory. All 3 of these theories have different perspectives on why gender exists. Let's start with structural functionalism. Remember, the structural functional approach understands human behavior as part of systems that help keep society organized and functioning. From this perspective, gender is a means of organizing society into distinct roles that complement each other. Some anthropologists have argued that hunter-gatherer societies originated the idea that men are providers and women take care of the home. Men were physically stronger and didn't have the demands of childbearing, which made it easier for them to take on more aggressive, autonomous roles like hunting or warfare. And these roles became institutionalized. Even once physical strength was no longer important for many jobs, it was taken for granted that men would be the breadwinners and women would care for the children. But there are holes in this theory, namely that the early anthropologists who studied this dynamic overemphasized the role of things like big game hunting. More recent anthropological work suggests that gathering, fishing, and small game hunting, all of which were also performed by women, played a much larger role in providing food in these societies. But the idea that we have 2 genders to play complementary roles has stuck around, partially through the work of sociologist Talcott Parsons. He argued that boys and girls are socialized to take on traits that are complementary to each other, to make it easier to maintain stable, productive family units. Boys are taught what Parsons calls instrumental qualities, such as confidence and competitiveness, that prepare them for the labor force. Meanwhile, girls are taught expressive qualities, such as empathy and sensitivity, which prepare them to care for their families. Parsons' theory was that a successful family needs people to have complementary skill sets, and gender gives us a way of pairing off these skills. And society, in turn, encourages gender conformity by making people feel that they have to fit these molds if they want to be romantically desirable, and by also teaching people to reject those who go against these gender norms. Though this theory was influential in the mid-20th century, it's fallen out of favor for a few reasons. First, Parsons was basing his theory on a division of labor that was specific to middle-class white America in the 1940s and 50s. It assumes a heteronormative and Western perspective on what a family is, but not all families are nuclear units with one man, one woman, and a gaggle of children. When you expand the definition of family to include same-sex couples, single parents, multi-generational families, or childless adults, it's less obvious that you should assume that a man works outside the home and a woman works inside the home. Second, the idea of complementary genders rests on there being two distinct and opposite genders. Again, a Western perspective. The idea of gender as a binary isn't universal, and it ignores all those whose identities don't conform to a two-gender system. Third, Parsons' theory ignores the personal and social costs of maintaining rigid gender roles. Critics argue that the idea that men need to be the ones working outside the home to maintain family stability is arbitrary, and it reinforces gender dynamics that give men power over women. Now, another perspective on gender is the symbolic interaction approach. While structural functionalists are concerned with how gender helps all of society work well, symbolic interactionists are more focused on how gender is part of day-to-day life. From this perspective, gender is something that a person does, rather than something that's either innate or imposed by institutions. Let's go to the thought bubble to talk about different ways that people do gender. Clothes, hairstyles, and makeup all telegraph gender to the people around you. Take these two people. You probably have a gut reaction about the gender of these people, even though the only thing that's different about them is what they're wearing. But what if the person in the suit had long hair or was wearing makeup? These might flip a switch in our brain to start seeing this person as a woman in a business suit. But having short hair and no makeup while wearing a dress doesn't necessarily flip the same switch. This pattern is an example of gender roles, or how a society defines how women and men should think and behave. A man wearing a skirt is seen as more of a rejection of traditional gender roles than a woman wearing pants is. Body language and how people interact with each other are also part of how people do gender. Women are socialized to be deferential in conversation, meaning that they're more likely to make eye contact to show that they're listening, or to smile as a way of encouraging their speaking partner. Crossing your legs is called ladylike, whereas if you sit on the subway with your legs spread out, you might get glared at for manspreading. Thanks, Thought Bubble. These exercises in doing gender are good examples of how our society's definitions of masculinity and femininity are inextricably linked to each gender's power in society. Masculine traits are associated with power, taking up more space, directing the conversation, and are often valued more than feminine traits. In other words, everyday social interaction reflects and helps reinforce gender stratification. But a limitation of the symbolic interaction approach is that it focuses on the micro rather than the macro. Because of its focus on situational experiences, it misses the broader patterns of gender inequality. For that, we need social conflict theory. You might remember gender conflict theory from our episode about Harriet Martineau, but in case you've forgotten, gender conflict theory argues that gender is a structural system that distributes power and privilege to some and disadvantage to others. Specifically, that structural system is the patriarchy, a form of social organization in which men have more power and dominate other genders. We can see examples of this structure in institutional practices that disadvantage women, like restricting higher education to men or refusing to allow women to vote. But we also see this in less official ways. Think about the traits that our society values. Rationality is often praised as a desirable way of thinking, especially in leaders, while irrationality means letting emotion affect decisions and is seen as a weakness. Women are stereotyped as more emotional and men as more rational, which makes people falsely see men as more natural fits for leadership positions. The way that patriarchy privileges certain people over others also isn't as simple as saying that all men are at the top of the power distribution. This is why there's more attention paid in sociology to intersectionality, or the analysis of the interplay of race, class, gender, sexual orientation, and other identities, which often results in multiple dimensions of disadvantage. While all women are disadvantaged by gender, it's also true that some women experience more disadvantage than others. And the converse is true for men. All men benefit from living in a society that privileges masculinity, but some men benefit more than others. To see this in action, let's go back to the stats on the gender wage gap that we talked about in the last episode. White women make 80 cents for every dollar a white man makes. Black women make 65 cents for every dollar a white man makes. If we divide those two numbers, we get the wage gap between white women and black women. A black woman makes 81 cents for every dollar that a white woman makes. But what about black men? while they make 73 cents for every dollar that white men make. So black women do worse economically than black men, who do worse than white women, who do worse than white men. Just looking at gender or just looking at race misses the way that disadvantages can stack on top of one another. Our understanding of social conflict theory also would not be complete without discussing a movement closely entwined with gender conflict theory: feminism. Feminism is the support of social equality for all genders, in opposition to patriarchy and sexism. Broadly speaking, feminism advocates the elimination of gender stratification, expanding the choices that women, men, and other genders are allowed to make, ending gender-based violence, and promoting sexual freedom. There are many forms that feminism can take, but let's highlight three major schools of thought within feminist theory. The first is liberal feminism, and no, I don't mean liberal in the political sense, I mean liberal in the classical sense, rooted in the ideals of freedom of choice and equal opportunity. Liberal feminists seek to expand the rights and opportunities of women by removing cultural and legal barriers to women's equality, like implementing policies that prevent discrimination in the workforce or improve reproductive freedom. This contrasts with socialist feminism, which views capitalism as the foundation of the patriarchy and advocates for full economic equality in the socialist tradition. Socialist feminists tend to believe that the liberal feminist reforms don't go far enough since they maintain most of the existing institutions of power. The third feminist school of thought is known as radical feminism, which believes that to reach gender equality, society must actually eliminate gender as we know it. Radical feminism has clashed heavily with other subsets of feminism, particularly on transgender individuals' rights. Many radical feminists refuse to acknowledge the gender identities of trans women and have accused the transgender movement of perpetuating patriarchal gender norms. And these three ways of thinking about feminism are only a few of the many views on how best to advocate for gender equality. Kinda like how there are many theories within sociology about how we should think about gender. Today,
Welcome back. Okay, so that was just our brief introduction to gender as a social construct. You guys will have the reading and the text questions as well as the critical thinking questions due tomorrow. If you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I hope you have a great rest of your day.